4 women, same river, different nights, and a city that took almost a year to connect the dots. That is where this story begins, not with a dramatic arrest, not with a breakthrough in a laboratory, not with a witness coming forward after years of silence. It begins with a river running through one of America's most progressive cities, a river that became a graveyard, while the people living alongside it had no idea. The Willamette River cuts through Portland, Oregon like a spine. 40 miles of water running through the heart of the Pacific Northwest. Bridges everywhere, lights reflecting off the surface at night. Beautiful, in the way that rivers are beautiful when you do not know what they are holding. Between 2022 and 2023, 4 women were pulled from that river. Kristin Smith, Charity Perry, Joanna Speaks, Bridget Webster. 4 women, different ages, different backgrounds, different lives, all found in the same body of water. All in a city of 600,000 people, going about their days on the banks of a river that was keeping the worst kind of secret. And the man investigators believe put them there, Jesse Calhoun, had been walking those same streets, breathing that same air, living in that same city while the families of 4 women waited for answers that nobody was giving them fast enough. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. His trial is happening right now, in 2026, in Portland, Oregon. In a courtroom where the families of Kristin Smith and Charity Perry and Joanna Speaks and Bridget Webster are finally getting to sit across from the man charged with taking everything from them. Today, we are going to Portland. We are going to stand on the banks of the Willamette and understand what it means when a city loses 4 women to the same river and almost does not notice. We are going to follow every thread of an investigation that is still unfolding in real time, and we are going to say the names that this case has always been about. Kristin, Charity, Joanna, Bridget. Before we go to that river, before we stand on those banks and understand what investigators found and when, and why it took so long, you need to know who these women were. Not the charging documents, not the press conferences. Them. Kristin Smith was a young woman navigating homelessness in Portland. She disappeared in 2022. Her family had been looking for her. The way families look for people in cities frantically at first, then desperately, then with the particular exhaustion of searching a place that is large enough to swallow someone and show no sign. She was found in the Willamette. Charity Perry disappeared in 2023. She was someone's daughter, someone's friend, someone whose absence left a shape in the world that no amount of time has been able to fill. Her family learned of charges in her death when the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office stood up and named the suspect who they believed had taken her. Joanna Speaks and Bridget Webster, also found in 2023. Also the Willamette. Also young women who had been navigating the particular vulnerability of homelessness in a city that likes to believe it takes care of its most marginalized people. Portland has a reputation, progressive, compassionate, a city that cares, and in many ways it does. But there is a gap between the reputation and the reality that this case has forced into the open. A gap that exists in almost every major American city. The gap between the people the system sees clearly and the people the system looks past. 4 women in the same river. And it took almost a year from the first body to the arrest. That is the gap. Jesse Calhoun. That name was not well known outside Portland before the charges. He was not a public figure, not someone whose face appeared in the news before investigators started connecting the dots. He was a man living in the city, moving through it, using it. According to prosecutors, he met his victims through online platforms and interactions in the city. The specific details of how he allegedly connected with each woman are part of a trial that is actively unfolding right now. Details that a jury is hearing for the first time. Details that the families of these women have been waiting years to hear said out loud in a room with a judge present. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. But here is the detail that makes this case impossible to walk away from. By the time investigators charged Jesse Calhoun with the murder of Kristin Smith in August of 2025, he had already been indicted the previous year on 3 counts of second-degree murder for the group. Deaths of Charity Perry, Joanna Speaks, and Bridget Webster. 4 women, multiple indictments, 1 name. And Portland, a city that prides itself on seeing everyone, had 4 of its daughters in the same river before the full picture came into focus. A prosecutor named Melissa Morero stood in front of cameras after the charges in Kristin Smith's case were announced. She said something that cut through everything. She said, "We remain committed to the investigation and to securing justice for these women." The investigation, not the case. The investigation, still ongoing, still open, still asking questions that the trial has not yet fully answered. Because here is what keeps investigators up at night about the Willamette River murders. Are there more? Stop right here. Before we go any further into the evidence and the trial, and the question of what a jury in Portland is going to decide, I need you to do something. Think about what you just heard. 4 women, same river, city of 600,000 people, almost a year between the first body and an arrest. And then tell me something in the comments. Have you ever lived in a city or known someone who has, where you felt like certain people's disappearances just did not get the same urgency? Where the response felt slower, quieter, less visible than it should have been? Because this case is not just about Jesse Calhoun. It is about a system that moves at different speeds depending on who is missing. And that conversation deserves to happen out loud. Subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell. Because this trial is happening in real time in 2026. Every week there are new developments coming out of that Portland courtroom. When a verdict comes, you need to be here the moment it drops. Share this video. One share. One more person who hears the names Kristin, Charity, Joanna, and Bridget. One more signal. Now let us talk about what the investigation actually found. Because the evidence in this case is the kind that makes experienced detectives go quiet. The Willamette River has bridges. Lots of them. Portland is a city defined by its bridges. 12 of them crossing the river within the city limits alone. The Hawthorne Bridge, the Morrison, the Steel, the Burnside. At night they are lit up, their reflections moving on the water below, postcard beautiful. They are also, for anyone who knows the river, places where things can be put into the water without being immediately visible from the road above. Investigators looking at the pattern of where and when the 4 women were found have been building a picture of the river as a location chosen deliberately, not randomly, not opportunistically. Chosen with the specific knowledge of someone who understood the geography, who knew how water moves, who knew where the current runs and where it does not, and what that means for how long something stays hidden. That kind of knowledge does not come from a map. It comes from time spent on those banks, from knowing the city the way a resident knows it, from the specific familiarity of someone who has stood on those bridges in the dark and understood the water below. DNA evidence collected from multiple crime scenes and processed through forensic analysis connected Jesse Calhoun to the victims in ways that the prosecution has described as central to their case. Cell phone data placed him in proximity to locations relevant to the investigation. Digital evidence from online platforms has been examined by investigators who spent months reconstructing the connections between Calhoun and the women he allegedly targeted. The picture that prosecutors have been building piece by piece, data point by data point, in a case that has been years in the making, is one of a man who understood exactly what he was doing, who chose his victims with a specific awareness of their vulnerability, who used the river the way serial killers use geography as a tool, and who, according to the indictments, did it 4 times. Prosecutor Melissa Marrero said something else during those press conferences that I want you to sit with. She said we remain committed to the investigation. Not committed to the prosecution, the investigation. The ongoing, still open, still asking questions investigation into what happened to 4 women in the Willamette River between 2022 and 2023. Because here is the question that nobody in Portland has been able to stop asking since the charges were filed. Are Kristin Smith and Charity Perry and Joanna Speaks and Bridget Webster the only ones? A river does not keep all of its secrets visible. A river moves. It carries things. It takes things that were put in one place and moves them somewhere else. It hides things in its depth for months before the current changes and the surface gives something back. Investigators working this case have been aware from the beginning that the 4 confirmed victims may not represent the full scope of what happened in Portland during those years. The pattern, the geography, the method, the apparent targeting of women experiencing homelessness is the kind of pattern that experienced investigators recognize as potentially extending beyond the known charges. The investigation is ongoing. The trial is happening now, and the river is still there, still moving, still holding whatever it has not yet chosen to give back. Here, the second place I need to stop and sit with you today, because we just arrived at the part of this case that the families of Kristin Smith and Charity Perry and Joanna Speaks and Bridget Webster have been living inside for years. The not knowing how many, the understanding that the man on trial may represent only part of the truth. The waiting for a verdict, for additional charges, for the investigation to say definitively whether the river gave everything back or whether it is still keeping something. So I want to ask you directly, drop this in the comments. How do you think a family lives inside that uncertainty? How do you go to a trial knowing that justice for your person may be delivered, but that the full picture of what happened may still be incomplete? How do you hold grief and hope and anger and patience all at the same time for years? Tell me, because the families of these 4 women have been doing exactly that, and they deserve for people watching this video to understand what that actually costs. Please subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell. This trial is unfolding in real time, and this channel is going to be here for every development. You need to be subscribed before the verdict comes. Share this video because a city of 600,000 people is watching a trial right now that 4 families have been waiting years for. The more people who know these names, the more pressure exists to make sure this case gets everything it deserves. Stay with me, because we need to talk about what this case has revealed about Portland and about every city where certain women disappear and the response is slower and quieter than it should be. Portland declared a homelessness state of emergency in 2023. That context matters enormously to this case, because the 4 women Jesse Calhoun is charged with killing were not random victims chosen without pattern. They were women who were unhoused. Women who were navigating one of the most acute homelessness crises of any American city. Women who existed in a state of particular vulnerability that made them harder to find when they went missing and slower to connect when the pattern began to emerge. There are over 6,000 unhoused people in Portland on any given night. People who move between shelters, between encampments, between temporary situations that make tracking a person's movements almost impossible. People whose disappearance may not be reported immediately, or may be reported and filed without the urgency that other missing persons cases receive. That is not an accusation against Portland specifically. It is a pattern that exists in every major American city, a pattern that this case has put under a light that is uncomfortable but necessary. When Kristin Smith disappeared in 2022, how long before the alarm fully rang? When Charity Perry and Joanna Speaks and Bridget Webster went missing in 2023, how quickly did the investigation connect what was happening in that river to a single source? The answers to those questions are part of what the families of these women have been asking, part of what advocates for unhoused people in Portland have been asking, part of what makes this trial happening right now in 2026 about more than 1 man and 4 charges. It is about who gets protected and who gets the slow response, and what happens in the gap between those 2 things when a predator is operating and counting on that gap to keep him invisible. Jesse Calhoun has pleaded not guilty. His attorney has said he adamantly denies the allegations. He will have his day in court. He is having it right now. But the 4 women had their day in the Willamette, and nobody was there for them. Kristin Smith, Charity Perry, Joanna Speaks, Bridget Webster. 4 names, 4 women who were found in the same river, in the same city, in the same terrible window of time. 4 families who have been carrying the particular weight of not just grief, but injustice, the knowledge that their people existed in a space where the protections available to others were not fully extended to them. Their trial is happening right now. A jury in Portland, Oregon is sitting in a room hearing evidence about what happened in the Willamette between 2022 and 2023, hearing testimony, looking at photographs, listening to the DNA evidence and the cell phone data and the digital records that investigators spent years assembling. The verdict has not yet come, but it is coming. And when it does, these 4 names deserve to be the center of every headline, not the defendant, not the legal strategy, not the procedural details of how a trial unfolds. Kristin, Charity, Joanna, Bridget. They were daughters, friends, women with histories and futures that were taken from them in a city that is still reckoning with what it missed and why, and what it is going to do differently. Before you go, I want to leave you with the question that every person following this trial in Portland is sitting with right now. When the verdict comes, whatever it is, does it feel like justice to you? Does a courtroom verdict address the systemic failure that allowed 4 women to end up in the same river before the full picture came into focus? Or does justice for Kristin and Charity and Joanna and Bridget require something bigger than 1 verdict in 1 trial? Drop your answer in the comments, because that conversation is the most important one this case has ever produced, and it deserves to be louder than a courtroom. Please subscribe to the Cold Case Signals, ring that notification bell. This verdict is coming in 2026, and this channel will be here the moment it lands, with a full breakdown of everything the jury decided and what it means for the families and the ongoing investigation. Share this video. 1 share, 1 more person who says these 4 names, 1 more signal sent from the banks of the Willamette into a world that should have been louder about this a long time ago. We have more cases coming, more signals, more stories told the way they deserve, with depth, with truth, and with absolute respect for every woman at the center of them. I will see you on the next one.